On this episode of Supervision Simplified, we're really excited to share with you a conversation that we're having with a clinician who is based in Maine. And she's going to be sharing with us a really intimate look into her supervisory experience, where she had some really disturbing supervision with a clinician who turned out to actually not even be a real supervisor. And she ended up losing a third of her hours in supervision with this person. And you're going to be really stunned when you hear what happened. So tune in. Hello there, and welcome to Supervision Simplified. I am Dr. Amy Parks, and I'm so excited to welcome today Skye Clark, who is here joining us from Maine today. And she is here to talk to us about her supervisory experience and all things supervision from her perspective. Thanks so much for joining us today, Skye.
Thank you so much for having me.
We're really excited to hear about your story and really honored and privileged to have you join us to talk to us about your supervisory experience. I know that it has or was not an easy one, and we're really honored to have your lessons for us today and really to be able to share, a little bit about your story with people so that they can learn from you and hear a little bit about what you experienced so that we can walk away with some lessons learned and some ways to sort of do some things differently, both from the supervisory supervision perspective as well as the supervisee perspective, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So tell
Absolutely.
us a little bit about yourself, Skye.
Well, so I'm originally from Tennessee. Grew up in the Nashville area, actually in Franklin, Tennessee, and recently just moved up to Maine. Don't really have any family up here, but
Wow, that was
um,
a shift. So you went from the South to like the freezing cold North.
yes, it's like very cold today and very snowy, but yeah, and a big reason why I got into counseling was I I went into therapy really early. I am a person with a disability. I have a hearing disability, and really saw kind of how that as a young person, how that really helped me, having a therapist, having like an advocate. And so that's really kind of what I want to do now and provide for my clients now, is just really paying that forward, because I know how big that was for me. And it's beautiful. It's such a beautiful experience to be a therapist.
That's amazing. So are your clients now primarily clients that have disabilities? Is that your specialty?
Yes, so I
Mm-hmm.
primarily work with a lot of folks that have ADHD and autism, and I see a lot of folks too that have like chronic pain, chronic illness. Just I see a lot of people who just feel very misunderstood based off of their disabilities, and I relate to that a lot, and that's been really rewarding to provide that safe space for them, because I know how icky it can feel, how just how lonely it can feel too. So it's been wonderful.
So your experience in counseling inspired you to get a degree in counseling.
Yes, it did.
Uh-huh.
Yes,
And
yep.
where did you go to grad school?
I went to Austin P State University in Clarksville, and it was just, oh, like I will praise it over and over and over, because it really helped me grow so much, and it was really hard. It was very challenging, but it was so good. I wouldn't trade it for the world.
So you had a great grad school experience.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
And then where did you end up doing your internship?
So I did my internship. I did a practicum at the Refuge Center for Counseling in Franklin, and then I did my internship in Hendersonville at a private practice called Living Free Therapy.
Is Hendersonville in North Carolina or is that in
No,
Tennessee? Okay.
that's in Tennessee. There's
Okay.
two. I know,
There's
it's
one in
always
North
so.
Carolina, I think too. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't
Yes,
know.
yeah, I know,
Okay.
it's so weird.
And so
Yes.
what made you move from Tennessee to Maine?
Oh goodness. Well, first of all, it's very very chill up here.
Literally and figuratively, I guess. Yeah,
Very, very much
yeah.
so. Yes. But my spouse and I, we're very adventurous people, and we really are big advocates for kind of becoming uncomfortable, and kind of
Oh,
pushing our limits. And we don't have any family up here. We vacationed up here a couple of years ago, fell in love with it. And we're just like, let's just do it. Like, I don't want to live in the what ifs. Like, what if we never moved there? What would life look like? So we have no regrets. It's been really fun.
I love that. That's amazing.
Thank
The
you.
reason why I specifically ask is because for a lot of people, they're, navigating the licensure process in new states is can
Yes.
be really challenging. So maybe we can touch on that in a little bit.
Yes.
So talk us through your experience when in your internship period when you were in Hendersonville, you obviously had to have supervision during your internship experience, but you could talk a little bit about that, but I know that we wanted to focus really on your supervisory experience towards licensure.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. So, when I was in practicum, so this is kind of a common theme that I've really experienced throughout my pre-licensure experience. I really felt like gaining support was a struggle. Having that support was a struggle, especially from supervisors. Towards the end of my experience, I got pretty lucky. I had a pretty amazing supervisor that really advocated for me, but there was a lot of distrust for a long time. Um, and maybe still there is a little bit. Uh, but I did do my practicum in Franklin, and I left that practicum because I just felt like I wasn't getting the support I needed, and went into I was kind of scrambling to find a new placement, and came across an ad online for a private practice, and I was just like, let's just try it because I'm really desperate at this point just to get somewhere. So that kind of started that process, and I was just like swept right in, and that was when COVID happened. So my whole pre-licensure experience, I feel, was really abnormal, very,
Mm-hmm.
very abnormal.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so when did your licensure supervision start where it kind of went haywire?
Yeah, so that started in August of 2020.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, I Yeah, because I was doing my internship with somebody because I'm LPC,
Mm-hmm. So you're
and
a
so I was doing
counselor. Mm-hmm.
yeah, so I was doing it with a marriage and like a licensed marriage and family therapist, and
Mm-hmm.
the laws are a little wonky. Like you
Mm-hmm.
can only get so much supervision from somebody that is not uh
An
like you're
LPC.
primarily yeah,
Right. Mm-hmm.
exactly.
Right.
So um after I graduated, my supervisor from my internship she was not very comfortable with taking me on because of that, and so I had to find another LPC, um and just kind of start that process again. And then
Mm-hmm.
she was like, it was just really confusing because she
Mm-hmm.
was wanting to, I mean, I can get into it, but one thing that I really noticed with the supervisor relationship is there are some people that can be very abusive of this power,
Mm-hmm.
and it can feel very, very trapping.
Mm.
That's kind of exactly how I felt the entire time. I just felt really stuck, really trapped.
So it sounds like it was confusing for you because you didn't really understand all of the regulations
Correct.
required for you between an LCS or an LMFT or marriage and family therapist and a counselor, and the supervisors that you were talking to also didn't sound like they understood fully what their roles were as well, or what their responsibilities were as well. Talk to me a little bit about that power dynamic that you experienced.
Oh boy, yes. So sometimes even like thinking back on this period is pretty tough because I think now I have so much more clarity as to just how unethical this power dynamic truly was. um I had so I was the only well, okay, I want to start here. uh so whenever I entered into this internship position with this supervisor, there was another intern that started with me, and uh she there was an incident that happened, to where there was a confrontation between like this intern and my supervisor, and so there was a lot of weirdness. Like my supervisor even filed a police report on this person, and like really encouraged me to come with her to make this police report. So that was kind of like the first taste I got of this supervisor, of like, oh no, if you make one small mistake, like she will go to the police
Hmm.
and make a police report on you.
Hmm.
And so that really set the tone for me, like, ooh, I need to be careful here.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
this is scary because I don't really understand what happened, but
Hmm.
she was like, it kind of ruined that person's career.
Hmm. So there was a
That
lot of
was,
lack of transparency there.
yes, very
Mhm.
much so.
Mhm.
Um, and as and I it with this supervisor, because this was during COVID, and she was in private practice, and she was really encouraging me to acquire my own clients, really be big into marketing, putting myself out there. And I had a really hard time acquiring clients because of the pandemic.
Was there a
And
lot virtual? Was everything virtual?
it eventually became virtual, everything
Mhm.
did, but
Mhm.
I had to start doing sessions with her, so, like,
Mhm.
sitting in some of her clients', sessions and kind of, like, co-counseling with her, so it was interesting because I really got to see her counseling style, but I now kinda looking back, it really blurred the lines quite a bit because we were spending so much time together,
Mhm.
um, like, all day pretty much.
Mhm.
So, that was confusing.
Mhm. Mhm. So it made it hard for you to figure out what your style was, yet at the same time too, part of internship and part of supervision is to get the support of a supervisor and to sort of start figuring out, what are some ways that a mentor is supporting you. So that's,
Yes.
sometimes not inappropriate. So
Mhm.
when you went into licensure supervision, how did that dynamic work?
Whew. Well, I it was really it was confusing because because like I didn't understand that she was LMFT and I needed an LPC to do primarily all of my a lot of my hours, and so I had to like switch gears and find a different supervisor. Um, But what was odd was that, my primary supervisor, the one from internship, she really encouraged me to kind of like stay on with her. So I did 1099 work with her. So she still kind of like handled all the overhead costs, but like I was seeing somebody else, and then eventually she became like my supervisor again. It was very confusing. There was a lot of like wishy-washy, like I'm just kind of like following what I'm supposed to do because I'm
Mhm.
confused.
Mhm. Hmm.
So but with this supervisor, when I was in so we spent a lot of time together, as I mentioned, doing a lot of co-counseling. Sometimes I would go into the office and we would just see clients face to face, like with masks. Also seeing people virtually online, and like I would be sitting next to her, so we developed a pretty intimate relationship.
Mhm.
um but the lines got very, very quickly blurred,
Mhm.
and it was really hard for me to know like what was appropriate and what was inappropriate because I think I
Mhm.
was so afraid too. I've seen her destroy somebody else's career,
Right.
uh and that's going to be a pretty common theme uh that I witnessed quite a bit during my time with her, because I think I was with her for about 2 or 3 years.
Wow.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Yes. So it was pretty scary. One thing I want to mention too, I never was very transparent with my university about a lot of the unethical stuff that was happening. And looking back, I really wish that I would have been more transparent, especially with my supervisor at school, the person that was running my practicum and internship and helped guiding us. I think I was just so afraid of
Mm.
my experience not counting, and having to kind of like go through this whole process of finding another supervisor again, after having to make such a quick shift after my practicum. So everything felt so strategic on my end, but I had to abandon a lot of myself too, and that was hard.
Right, because if you had potentially shared what was happening, they might have pulled your internship and then you would have gotten farther behind.
Exactly. And I was working, I was basically kind of doing a private practice. I was marketing myself, I was acquiring my own clients, I was doing everything. And so if that were to have happened, all of those relationships that I worked so hard to acquire would have just been gone.
Right.
So I didn't want that because that felt really sacred, my relationship with my clients during that time.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. So talk us through what happened next.
Whew, yes. So there was a lot of, as I mentioned, and it's really, even kind of like talking about this is really confusing still, but there was just a lot of blurred lines. This supervisor, when I was a student, so as an intern supervisor or supervisee, I, she started really kind of like encouraging us to start having supervision at her house. And it that's kind of when I noticed that some things were getting a little weird. She would oftentimes encourage us to kind of have girl talk, and she would call me after work every day and just want to talk. And I was so scared of getting fired, of getting put in a position to where I'd have to start over, that there was just part of me that I was like, I just need to go along with this. Even though there's a part in my brain where I'm like, this is really, really unprofessional. This is super unethical. Like, I just need to get through this stage and then I can kind of like do something about it.
Mhm.
But lines started to get very, very blurred, inviting me over to her house, encouraging me to hang out with her family, with her son, having like pool parties, having like drinks often. Like she would buy alcohol for us to hang out. And it
Hmm.
was so confusing. And,
Mhm.
and then she started sharing a lot of her trauma with me. And so I was just kind of carrying it all for her. And
Wow.
that felt really, I mean, and it was pretty deep, dark stuff that I would never disclose in a professional relationship whatsoever. So it just put me in a really weird position because I was like, I know all this information about this woman. Um, but like, I'm also supposed to be like her employee. So what do I do?
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah.
Um, But things started to get a little weird because, there was just like this really inappropriate friendship that was happening. And I just felt so powerless throughout the entire thing. And I was so afraid, like I mentioned, that was really the biggest that was kind of like the biggest like emotion that I felt throughout this entire pre-licensure experience post graduation. It's just I was so scared of my whole world crumbling down. And I had seen this lady, this supervisor, like go after some of these supervisees and get them, like I saw them get, fired from their school, get let go from their school programs. And I just did not want that to happen because I'd come so far at that point. And it was just kind of like keep your head down and just don't really bring attention to it yet because it didn't feel safe at all.
Did you get another supervisor at any point?
I did.
Uh-huh.
So I had to get the LPC.
Mhm.
Um and so she did a lot of my session, or she did a lot of my supervisee stuff, but then this supervisor was like, "Hey, we can start doing insurance. Like you can file insurance under me and I'll become your secondary supervisor." And I was like, "Okay, that sounds great," because I was needing so many clients
Mhm.
for my hours. So I was pretty desperate. And so then, she became my secondary supervisor. So I had two.
Mhm.
But then she kind of convinced me to leave my other supervisor for a
Which
little
you
while.
mean the LPC supervisor?
Hmm.
Uh-huh.
And
Okay.
just to primarily work with her.
Uh-huh.
And, and keep in mind, like, at this point, I didn't have any doubts about, um, this supervisor's credentials, their qualifications, because I trusted her.
Mhm.
She was involving me in her family. She was
Mhm.
telling me her secrets. She was um listening to me about some of the traumatic experiences that I had in my practicum. And so
Mhm.
I thought this woman was really on my side and that she was who she said she was.
Mhm.
Come to find out, she was never even an approved supervisor to begin with. And I'll get to that later, but
Wow.
it's
Okay.
just been surprise after surprise after surprise. And I'm the one that paid for it
Right.
all the way.
Okay.
Um, so so there was a moment where things started to change. This supervisor, she was opening a big practice up, and she was wanting a bunch of people to come to this practice and to be 1099 or just to rent out space.
This
And
woman you've been supervising with all along.
yes.
Okay. Okay.
And I've been hearing, I she encouraged me to sit on meetings with her lawyer to talk about the paperwork and to, just to kind of like, she took me under her wing basically.
Mhm.
Little me was just like, wow, I'm so honored. Like somebody actually cares about me.
Mhm.
Somebody actually wants me to grow, wants me to like thrive. And so I was really involved in this process of her opening up this new clinic and just kind of seeing all the behind the scenes because she wanted me to. She wanted
Mhm.
me to be involved in that. But there was a moment. This is when things changed. Was there? So we'd been going along having this kind of inappropriate relationship all along, and I'm scared. I don't want to get on her bad side because I know what happens. She'll call the police or make
Mhm.
a false police report on me.
Mhm.
Um, and so there was a moment where when we moved into the new space, she required everybody to paint their own offices, and I'm gonna rent one of these offices and kind of do like a sublease thing through
Mhm.
her practice. And
Mhm.
I don't, for a lot of people who are pre-licensure postmasters, they they kind of get into situations to where there's kind of a percentage cut whenever
Right.
you join a practice.
Right.
So this was part of the deal. So she was like, I'll take 25% of your income, and that'll cover your rent, but also your overhead expenses and supervision.
Right.
And at this time I was making quite a bit of money because I was seeing a lot of clients.
Right.
um so I was just like, wow, like she's doing me a favor, how amazing, she's really rooting for me. But there was a moment where it all changed, where in this new space she required everybody to paint their own offices. It was just really dumb. Like it was kind of, this is kind of silly talking about it, but this is where things really shifted. But she gave all of the tenants about maybe like a week notice to paint our offices, and I think we had to do it like in a specific weekend. Well, I've dreamed about this for so long after sharing an office space with all these other therapists and using their spaces. Like having my own office was my dream,
Mhm.
my own space. And so I was excited to paint my office like a really fun color because I work with a lot of kids and teens. And so I did a purple color. And, my husband and I spent an entire weekend painting this office with like no painting experience. And, she would come in and like watch us paint it and just be like, oh, wow, looks good. And I got a call the following Monday from the other owner of this office space saying like, you got to repaint your office. Like it can't be purple. Like it looks so tacky. It's inappropriate. And I was like, well, why didn't anybody stop me? Why didn't
Mhm.
anybody stop me and my husband when we were doing this? Um, and instead of taking accountability, this supervisor just kind of made a really big ordeal about this.
So you mean
And
the other owner made a big deal about it? Okay.
well, no, it was the supervisor, like the
Oh,
main
oh, oh.
one.
The one that
And
came in and watched you over the weekend.
correct. And saying like, you got to repaint this now. And I kind of pushed back. I was like, what are you talking about? Like it's just a color, and this is like, why didn't you stop me
Right.
whenever I was doing this? And this is where things went, like, they
Okay.
switched.
Okay.
Because she started, I said, I'm not changing it. And she started to, like, a whole different personality came out. This was
Mm,
not a friend anymore. This was a very, very, very domineering and just like a very controlling person all of a sudden. I was out of town the following week, and all I got was just email after email after email, just harassing me, saying, you got to change this, you got to do this. And I was already gonna change it. I just kind of wanted to move on. I was so
mhm.
over it. I was so confused. Um, and she just kept taking it further and further, had meetings with me, started interrogating me a little bit, saying, you have a lot of anger problems, I've never seen this from you before. Who are you? This is so disturbing. And I was just really shameful, because I was like, I'm so sorry, I showed a human side of me. This was just kind of like a normal reaction, and I thought I was safe to express that with you. But she started to hold, I will never forget, she held this meeting with me on Zoom one day, and at this point I was terrified of her, because she was just not shy to come up from behind me and just start kind of harassing me, saying, like, why do you do this, blah blah blah, like, this is so inappropriate, like, this is so disrespectful. And I was just confused. But she had a meeting with me on Zoom one day, saying, like, if you ever, have an attitude with me again or show anger with me again, you're out of here. And I was just like, whoa, like, where is this coming from? Because, like, just a month ago I was hanging out with your family by your poolside, and, like, we've been talking every day as if friends, and I thought I was having a friend conversation, not a supervisor conversation, because the lines have been so blurred.
Right. Right. Right.
And um and so she threatened to fire me that day, said, if I ever have an attitude again, you're out of here. I'm like, we're done. And so that's when I was just like, okay, this person is not who she says she is. I feel very deceived right now. And that's when I made a decision, and I couldn't tell anybody about what I was going through. None of my friends, because they were all involved with her. um None of my fellow supervisees, because, like, I felt like I was the problem here. I felt like it was my fault. I felt like it was me. Um and I never wanted to be shamed like that ever again. And so I held this in for an entire year.
Wow.
So
Wow.
my family knew what was going on, and of course they were like, Skye, you need to get out of this. Like, this is so inappropriate. This is not okay. And I want to be pretty transparent here. During this time, because I felt so alone in my experience, this was, the first time where I was having severe suicidal ideation. I didn't feel like I should be here anymore. Ooh, it's like making me emotional talking about it. But
Yeah. I'm so
um
sorry.
you know
Wow.
and and I was having to be strong for all these clients at the same time, like, pretend
Yeah.
that
Wow.
I'm okay when I wasn't. um and it was really scary. It was really hard. And at this time, there was another supervisee that my supervisor was taking on, and so I felt like, okay, I can't be transparent, because that's gonna, like, ruin this dynamic and probably make a bigger deal. Like, I'm probably definitely gonna get kicked out of the field if I bring this to anybody's attention. And I really regretted not warning this other supervisee, um, because he saw this too. I mean, one thing that is a very, very clear thing to me now is that these cycles happen. So it's kind of like tag, you're it.
Yeah.
You're the one that's gonna get kind of like harassed. You're gonna
Right.
be the one that's gonna get disciplined, punished. And she went so hard and so far with this punishment, um, that you're just kind of like, oh my gosh, like, I must be a really bad clinician. I must be a really bad supervisee.
Right.
So,
And you got into this cycle of this relationship where you were doubting everything about yourself and
Mhm.
everything about what you knew.
Yes.
And and if in the very beginning you had reached out to the people that were supposed to be supporting you, your professor, the other supervisor, if you
Yes.
had maybe checked the credentials of the supervisor that you had been working with, had you known where to do that or how to do that,
Yes.
um if you had maybe trusted your family, um to support you and protect you, but you didn't know, you because you were so afraid. And the systems we've created um kept you afraid, which is
Yes.
really unfortunate.
Yes.
How 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 could we have avoid that? How can we, if you hindsight's so 2020, like how could you have avoided any of that? Like where could you have gone? Do you know, like now looking back, you said you could have talked to your professor, but after you were out of grad school, like do you think that there was anywhere you could have turned
Mhm.
that maybe could have been a lifeline for you during that time?
Yeah, I mean, I've thought about this so much because especially during the time, I just felt I just wanted somebody just to reach out and save me.
Yeah. I'm
Yeah,
wondering if that other supervisor that became, you became isolated from, if
yeah,
that person had known the reality of the situation. I mean, obviously, so then if that person could have seen, like, no, that this is not okay, like you can't be in that relationship anymore. So I guess I want to know, like, what ended up happening, because did you even get any of those hours?
no.
Right.
So,
So then
so
what? How are you
yeah.
even working now? I feel so horrible.
Oh, yeah. I mean, so kind of so moving forward. So after that event happened, because I like after the confrontation where I really saw her true colors, I guess is a safe way to say it. I just was like, okay, I got to keep my head down. And that's what everybody was telling me. Just don't say anything. Just like get this stage over with. It'll be, once you're licensed, you're free. So it was just like I was kind of keeping my eye on the prize.
Right.
But what ended up happening was that so there was this so I got a different supervisor from my primary supervisor because this one could not be my primary, but there was a time. This is what's so weird is that there was a time period for several months where she was my primary supervisor. So I was doing, and I was having like 2 or 3 hour supervision calls with her a week, so I was spending a lot of time and spending a lot of money on these things,
Right.
a lot of money. And so what ended up happening was that one day, so this was about 2 years later, so this would have been in 2022. She came up to me and she was like, hey, and it just came out of the blue and it was so nonchalant too, which is so bizarre. But she said, hey, I have bad news. So I got a letter from the board and they're basically saying I'm not allowed to be a supervisor whatsoever. And I was just like, what do you mean? Like
What?
I've done thousands of hours under you. Like what are you talking about? And cuz I have done, let's see, when I applied the first time around, I did over 55 hours of supervision of my 150 with her, and I paid for all of them.
Hmm.
A lot of money, like more money than I should have because
Right.
of that percentage thing.
Right.
But she came up to me and was like, I'm not qualified to be a supervisor anymore. So you need to just completely go with, like, get all your hours, all the insurance stuff, like, with, this other supervisor. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, we've been good. Like, we've been having this relationship for so long and I've been trusting, this process. And it was just so casual. Um, and so I had to like literally get off of her practice and move all of my clients over to this other supervisor in a time span of a month. So I was scrambling. I was having to create new paperwork. I mean, it was really stressful. It
Oh
was
my
all
gosh.
on me. All
Oh
of
my
it was
gosh.
on me. Um, and so fast forward, so I did the rest of my hours with this other supervisors, but I did 55 of the 150 with this, supervisor.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Um, and when I went to go apply for licensure the very first time, I gave I guess we'll call her like fraud supervisor.
Uh-huh.
I
Okay.
gave fraud supervisor my supervision form, said, "Hey, like I'm doing it." And she was like, "Yay, I'm so excited. This is so big. You deserve this." Like really really rooting for me, acting like everything was cool. And she even signed the supervision form, and she even got it notarized, okay?
Uh-huh.
And there's a part on the supervision form when you're applying for licensure that says like, I attest that I am an approved supervisor and
Uh-huh.
that everything that is on this page is correct, is like
Uh-huh.
fact. So
Uh-huh.
I didn't think anything of it because I was
Right.
like, it's all right there. Like she
Right.
signed it, and
Yeah.
I have signed contracts with this lady,
Uh-huh.
saying that she did like all these contracts. And one thing to note was that she kept changing the contracts whenever I was a supervisee with her. So she would like add like she would like do kind of like she would change the rules.
Oh my God.
She would change a lot of the wording in these, and she would change the percentage,
Oh
and
my
it was
God.
just really out of the like she did it I think 4 times, and I
Oh
was
my
just
God.
like, okay, like I guess like this is kind of weird, but like I'm afraid of this woman, so I'm just gonna go along with it. um and that should have been a huge red flag for me looking back. um but whenever so she signed a supervision form, signed off on 55 hours, signed off on like I think I almost had all of my clinical hours done with her because I was working so hard. And I looking back, I think I was overworking like with clients to compensate how incompetent I felt because of her. um and so I applied for supervision, or applied for my LPC license the first time, and I didn't hear back from the Tennessee board for months. So I applied in March, and then I called I think in July, and I was like, "Yo, like what's going on? Like I haven't heard from you. I'm like kind of waiting to like start my life." like
Right.
and I stayed on hold to try to understand what was going on with the board. And if you don't know, like a lot of boards, especially the one in Tennessee, they are very difficult to get a hold of.
Mm-hmm.
They're very difficult to like, it's hard to talk to a real person.
Right. Virginia's the same. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Uh-huh. And
Mm-hmm.
so like I was just kind of trusting the process. And when I got on the phone that day, the lady that I talked to, she was like, so the reason why we haven't approved your license is because you have a supervisor listed on here that's not even an approved supervisor. And I said, "What do you mean? I've paid over $12,000 for these supervision experiences just with this lady." And they were like, "Oh yeah, she's not even qualified. Like so none of these hours count. None of the client hours that you did and none of the supervision hours count." And I had to start over.
So you had to do the whole 55 hours with someone else.
Exactly. And I thought I was done. I thought I was done with my experience. And when I confronted her about this, she went completely silent. She didn't say any, like I emailed her saying like, "I'm so disappointed in you. How dare you?" And and I would like, everybody around me was saying, "You need to sue this lady. She stole so much money from you, so much of your time, so much of like your sanity, to be honest." And to now know that all of this was for nothing? Are you kidding me? Like I had a crisis again. Like that's when I mean,
Absolutely.
I was spiraling,
I can't even
spiraling.
imagine.
Um and she never admitted ever that she was wrong, ever. And never apologized, never. I mean, the fact that she just kind of went along with it all this time and left me thinking that I was okay, that like all of this was legit. And she knew in the back of her mind the entire time that it was never going to get approved. Like, and
Skye, that is one of the most horrific stories I think I've ever heard.
Yep, and it doesn't stop.
That is a really, really horrific story.
Yeah.
I I have so many more questions and concerns, and I think we probably need a part 2 conversation to this whole thing. I think that we need to have a follow-up offline conversation about how we need to talk to your university, and
Yes.
we need to do a state, I hope they're doing a state investigation, and
Yes.
all those things. I do hope that all those things are happening because as a supervisor, I think that worries me so much.
Yeah.
And I also am so proud of you for having survived all of that. And I also, as a person who has been a clinician for a very, very long time, want to encourage you to sort of make sure you get resupervised. Because
Yes,
kind of like the reparenting idea, like you've probably missed out on a lot of really, really good quality supervision.
I have.
That
And I
doesn't
know
mean that
that.
you're not a great clinician now.
Yeah.
And I also think that you've probably missed out on a lot of support
I have.
clinically.
I
So,
yep, I have. Yep.
yeah, so there's a lot to be said for that. So, gosh, so many takeaways from this.
Mhm.
What would you say, sort of as we sum up? And I do think we kind of need a whole nother conversation, Sky, around this. But as we sort of sum up, what do you think is the number one thing you would want listeners to sort of, if you could go back and talk to your 2020 self?
Mm. Oh goodness. I think I would say to her, I would just say use discernment. Um because I think looking back, the first time that I met her, all the red flags were there. All the alarm bells were going off in my body, saying something's wrong here. Something feels really weird. Something feels fake. And I think this whole experience has just really showed me to trust my gut, to trust those little inklings that come up whenever I feel any sense of doubt. And also just to say to her, like, this is not your fault. I think I took this blame and shame so personally, and really punished myself for so long, saying how could I have been so stupid to not. And and even the board was telling me, why didn't you investigate this further, why didn't you look into her credentials further? And I said, I thought I could trust this person,
Right. Right.
but I
Right.
think just to not beat myself up so much, because I now, looking back on this experience, I see how manipulative and how wrong and how disgusting this truly is. And I was, as a pre-licensed person, you're so powerless because you rely on so many of these professionals in the field to have your back, to be your back.
Right. Right.
And like, and to see that, like, that's not what was like happening. I mean, it was sabotage to the max, and it was all for a little power high for her, like, that's what makes me so sad.
It is so sad. And there's just no, I'm so disillusioned by the power dynamic that you're speaking of. It's
Yes,
really a partnership.
it is.
It's not a power ship.
Yeah, now I know
And
that.
yeah, and that's the thing that's really disturbing to me. It's not meant to be a power ship. That's not the relationship that it's meant to be. And one of the things I really want us to figure out is how to teach that it's a partnership.
Yes.
um and that's really, really important, and I really appreciate you coming and talking to us about this today, and sharing your experience and your story, and so much of what you went through, and what a I had no idea what to expect, and I'm going to spend all weekend thinking about this.
And
probably
she's
even
still
longer than that.
practicing. And that's the
Yeah.
crazy thing, is that I've had to really come to peace, because I was so excited for this moment of justice. And it took me, even after all this happened, to report this to the board, to be honest about my experience. I think it was more so about being honest with myself, what happened.
Yeah.
It took a really long time for me to open that door again.
Wow.
And it's been really hard because nothing has really happened. I mean, she's under investigation right now, but she's been under investigation for years. And
Yeah.
so having to find this peace within myself of re-understanding what justice feels like, what justice looks like, because it's not happening the way that I really wanted it to. Because she's
Right.
still out there practicing and seeing clients, and I don't know if she's seeing supervisees anymore. I don't really believe anything that came out of her mouth anymore.
Well, seeing
But
clients is one thing. Supervising and having interns, whole different deal.
it
Let's hope
is.
that that's not happening.
I hope
Yeah.
not either. But
Yeah.
but I do just have so much compassion for that 2020 version of me, because she
Absolutely.
so was just doing the best that she could. She was surviving. She was trying to navigate what being a new counselor in a pandemic was like, and
Right.
then to have this element of not having the support and just having somebody exploit her. um it's very sad, and I just feel I don't feel angry anymore. I just feel sad.
Yeah. And so afraid. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sky, thank you so much for sharing your story. And again, we're gonna have a we're gonna have a re-supervision session for you, I think, too. And we're gonna move on with this because I think that there's more to this story. There's a next chapter, I
I do
think,
too.
in this all of this. And thank you all for tuning in today to this episode of Supervision Simplified. Remember, the revolution starts here. And we hope you'll subscribe to Supervision Simplified and that you'll share it with your friends and your colleagues and your supervisees. We also want your comments and your stories and feedback so we can be sure to be talking about all the things that interest you the most. Until the next time, keep on simplifying and elevating your supervision game. Thanks so much for being with us.